The stars themselves seemed to tremble when the Volkarath fleet emerged from hyperspace above Earth. And the people of that small blue planet looked up at their night sky to see 3,000 warships blocking out the light of distant suns. Commander Thalvex stood at the center of his flagship, the mighty Devourer's Maw, and his reptilian eyes burned with cold satisfaction as he watched the primitive world spinning slowly beneath him. This would be his 18th conquest, and he expected it to be his easiest one yet. The Volkarath Dominion had spent centuries perfecting the art of terror, and they had crushed 17 star systems without mercy or hesitation. Entire species had been wiped from existence, their worlds burned to ash, their histories erased from the galactic records forever. Thalvex was a monster by any definition of the word, standing 8 feet tall with scales as black as the void between stars, and his claws had personally ended the lives of over 9,000 sentient beings. He wore their bones as decorations on his armor, a walking graveyard of conquered peoples. He turned to his communications officer and gave the order that had preceded the death of so many civilizations before. "Send the ultimatum," he commanded, his voice like grinding stones, "and make sure every creature on that pathetic little rock can hear it." The message was broadcast on every frequency known to galactic science, interrupting television programs and radio stations and emergency channels all across Earth. Billions of humans stopped what they were doing and listened to the voice of their would-be destroyer. People of Earth, the translation software converted his snarling words into hundreds of human languages. You have 7 of your planet's rotations to surrender unconditionally to the Volkarath Dominion. Failure to comply will result in the complete annihilation of your species and the destruction of your world. There will be no negotiation, no mercy, and no second chances. You are alone in this universe, and no one will come to save you. The message ended, and chaos erupted across the planet as governments scrambled to respond and citizens fled to shelters and religious leaders prayed to gods who offered no answers. Far away, in the neutral zone of space where the Galactic Council held their assemblies, representatives from hundreds of species watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of pity and resignation. They had seen this scenario play out many times before, and it always ended the same way. "Should we not intervene?" asked a delegate from the Luminari, a species of beings made entirely of living light. The council elder, an ancient creature whose species had been traveling the stars when humans were still living in caves, simply shook his massive head. "The Volkarath have not violated any galactic laws," he said with deep sadness in his voice, "and Earth is not a member of our council. We cannot act on their behalf, no matter how much we might wish to do so." "Then we simply watch them die?" the Luminari delegate asked. "We send our condolences," the elder replied, "and we remember them after they are gone. That is all we can do." Back on Earth, the 7 days passed in a blur of fear and frantic activity. Military forces around the world prepared for a battle they knew they could not win, while scientists worked day and night searching for any weakness in the alien fleet that they might exploit. The United Earth Coalition, a government that had only existed for 3 years and had been formed, specifically to handle the possibility of extraterrestrial contact, held emergency meetings in an underground bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Presidents and prime ministers and generals argued and shouted and pointed fingers at each other, but none of them could offer a solution that did not end with the death of every human being on the planet. And then, on the 6th day, a message arrived from the Galactic Council that changed everything. It was a copy of an ancient legal document, the Galactic Conquest Statutes, written thousands of years ago by species that had long since vanished from the universe. And buried within its countless pages was a single passage that made every human leader stop and stare in disbelief. Section 9, Article 7. The right of opposition. The law stated that any species facing conquest had the right to challenge the aggressor to single combat. If the defender's champion won, the attacking fleet must withdraw for 100 galactic cycles, and the conquered species would be granted protected status. It was an ancient tradition, rarely used and almost forgotten, but it was still legally binding under galactic law. The coalition leaders looked at each other with desperate hope blooming in their eyes. This was their chance, their only chance, to survive. But who could they send against Commander Thalvex, a warrior who had killed thousands with his bare claws? The debates went on for hours, with generals nominating their best soldiers and scientists, suggesting genetically enhanced super warriors that did not actually exist. Everyone had an opinion, and no one could agree on anything. And then a file appeared on the main screen of the conference room, placed there by someone who had access to the most classified military databases on the planet. The file contained a single name and a single photograph. Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez, age 43, formerly of the United States Army Special Forces, now retired and living in a small town in New Mexico. The room fell silent as the leaders read her record. She had served in conflicts on 4 continents, survived situations that should have killed her dozens of times, and earned more commendations for bravery than any soldier in modern history. But she was also small, aging, and entirely human. She had no genetic enhancements, no cybernetic implants, nothing that would give her an advantage against an alien killing machine. "This is insane," one general said. "She would be slaughtered in seconds." But the file contained one more piece of information, a psychological evaluation that made everyone in the room go very quiet. Elena Vasquez was not afraid to die. She had never been afraid to die. And when asked what she feared most in life, she had given an answer that no one expected: dying without purpose. She had said, "That is the only thing that scares me." The coalition made their decision. When Earth's response was finally transmitted to the Volcareth fleet on the 7th day, Commander Thalvex was in the middle of planning the invasion routes his ground forces would use. He read the message once, then twice, then a third time, convinced that his translator software had malfunctioned. Earth was invoking the right of opposition, and they were sending a single soldier to fight him. His laughter echoed through the bridge of the Devourer's maw, a harsh and terrible sound that made even his own officers flinch. "Fools," Commander Thalvex snarled, his claws digging deep grooves into the metal of his command throne. "They send one warrior to face the might of the Dominion, one pathetic creature to stand against me." He turned to his officers with a grin that showed every one of his razor-sharp teeth. "Let them come," he declared. "Let the entire galaxy witness the stupidity of humans before we erase them from existence. This will be the most entertaining execution I have ever performed." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council representatives watched Earth's response with confusion and dismay. They had given humanity a chance to fight, and humanity had apparently chosen to throw that chance away. But deep in the back of his ancient mind, the Council Elder felt something he had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. There was something in the tone of Earth's message, a calmness that did not match their desperate situation, an eagerness that made no sense for a species facing extinction. He had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, and he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this did not feel right. Something about these humans was different. And as he watched the tiny transport ship launch from Earth's surface and begin its journey toward the Volcareth flagship, he found himself doing something he had not done in a very long time. He found himself hoping. The transport ship Whisper was small and old and completely unremarkable, just a gray metal box drifting through the endless darkness of space toward the massive Volcareth flagship. Inside the ship, Elena Vasquez sat alone in the pilot's seat, watching the Devourer's maw grow larger and larger through the cockpit window. It was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet in half. And it was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. But Elena did not feel afraid. She had stopped feeling afraid a long time ago, back in a jungle in South America, where she had watched her entire squad die around her and had somehow survived against all odds. Fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her hands were steady as she guided the Whisper toward the docking port that the Valkyreth had designated. Her breathing was calm and even her heartbeat slow and regular. She might have been flying to a routine meeting instead of her probable death. The radio crackled to life and a harsh alien voice filled the small cockpit. "Human vessel, you will dock at Base 17 and surrender yourself to our warriors. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your planet. Do you understand?" Elena pressed the transmit button and spoke in a voice that carried no emotion. "I understand completely," she said. "I will comply with your instructions." She released the button and allowed herself a small smile. The Valkyreth thought they were in control of this situation. They thought she was a helpless victim coming to offer herself for slaughter. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The Whisper slid into the docking bay with a gentle thump, and Elena stood up from the pilot's seat. She took a moment to check her appearance in a small mirror, making sure her uniform was straight and her medals were properly aligned. She was not wearing armor of any kind, just the standard combat fatigue she had worn for most of her military career. She carried no weapons, no shields, no technology of any kind. The coalition leaders had begged her to take something, anything, that might give her an advantage. But Elena had refused every offer. "They expect us to rely on technology," she had told them. "They expect us to try and match their strength with machines and weapons. But that is not how humans win battles." She had tapped the side of her head with one finger. "This is our weapon," she had said. "This is what makes us dangerous. And they will never see it coming." Now, as the airlock door hissed open and she took her first step onto an alien vessel, Elena carried nothing but her training, her experience, and her absolute refusal to give up. The corridor outside was lined with Valkyreth warriors, hundreds of them, each one a nightmare of scales and claws and razor-sharp teeth. They towered over her, their weapons pointed at her chest, their eyes filled with contempt and amusement. Elena walked forward without hesitation, her boots clicking against the metal floor in a steady rhythm. She kept her eyes forward and her back straight, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. The warriors parted before her, creating a path that led deeper into the ship. Some of them laughed, their voices like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. Others snarled insults in their own language, their translators deliberately turned off. One warrior, even larger than the others, stepped directly into her path. He was nearly 3 times her size, and his breath smelled like rotting meat as he leaned down to stare into her face. "So small," he sneered. "So weak. I have crushed insects bigger than you." He spat at her feet, a glob of thick yellow saliva that splattered across her boots. Elena looked down at the spit, then looked up at the warrior's face. She held his gaze for a long moment, her expression completely unchanged. "You have something on your chin," she said calmly. "You should probably wipe that off before it gets embarrassing." The warrior's eyes widened in shock and then narrowed in fury. No prey had ever spoken to him like that before. He raised his clawed hand to strike her, but a sharp command from somewhere up ahead stopped him in mid-swing. "Bring her to me undamaged." Commander Thalvek's voice echoed through the corridor. "I want the pleasure of breaking her myself." The warrior lowered his hand and stepped aside, but his eyes promised terrible things as Elena walked past him. She would remember that look later. The corridor opened into a massive arena, a circular space the size of a football stadium with viewing platforms rising up on all sides. Thousands of Velkarith warriors filled those platforms, their excited chatter filling the air like the buzzing of angry insects. At the far end of the arena, elevated above everything else on a platform of black metal and gold, Commander Thalvex sat upon his command throne. He was even more terrifying in person than he had been on the video transmission. His scales seemed to absorb the light around him, making him look like a hole in reality. His claws were longer than Elena's forearms, and his eyes burned with an ancient hunger. Elena walked to the center of the arena and stopped, standing perfectly still as the noise of the crowd washed over her. She looked up at the commander and waited for him to speak. Thalvex leaned forward in his throne, studying her with the curiosity of a child examining a new toy. "You are the champion of Earth?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "You are the warrior they have chosen to fight for the survival of your species?" Elena nodded once. "I am Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "And I am here to invoke our right under the Galactic Conquest Statutes, Section 9, Article 7. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many of them had never heard of this ancient law. Thalvex waved one clawed hand dismissively. Yes, the right of opposition. A foolish tradition created by weak species to delay their inevitable doom. Do you truly believe this ancient law can save you?" Elena allowed herself another small smile. "I believe in following the rules," she said, "and those rules state that if I defeat your champion in single combat, your fleet must withdraw from Earth's system for 100 cycles. So I am here to fight." The commander's laughter was like thunder rolling across the arena. "Fight?" he roared. "You wish to fight me, little human? Do you know how many beings I have killed with these claws? Do you know how many species have begged for mercy at my feet?" Elena met his burning gaze without flinching. 9,047, she said. "I read your file. You are very proud of that number." The laughter stopped. The arena fell completely silent. "But I had a question for you, Commander," Elena continued, her voice calm and steady. "How many of those 9,000 victims actually fought back? How many of them truly tested your strength?" She stepped forward, just one step, but it was enough to make every warrior in the arena tense. "Because I promise you," she said, "I am not going to beg for mercy. I am not going to run away. I am going to stand in front of you and fight until one of us is dead. And I have been doing that my entire life." Commander Thalvex rose from his throne, his massive body casting a shadow that covered half the arena. "Then you will have your wish, little warrior," he snarled. "And the last thing you will ever see is my face as I tear you apart." Elena watched him descend from his platform, each step shaking the metal floor beneath her feet. She did not move, did not blink, did not show any fear at all. She had made her peace with death a long time ago. But she had not come here to die. She had come here to show the galaxy what a human being could do when they had nothing left to lose. Elena Vasquez woke up in a hospital bed 3 days after the battle, her body wrapped in bandages and connected to machines that beeped and hummed with quiet efficiency. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was a window, and through that window, she could see the blue sky of Earth, dotted with white clouds and completely free of alien warships. She had won. The second thing she saw was a crowd of people standing around her bed. Doctors, nurses, military officers, government officials, and what appeared to be a delegation of alien beings in formal robes. "She is awake," one of the doctors announced, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, asking questions and offering congratulations and trying to shake her hand. Elena held up one bandaged arm to stop the noise. "Please," she said, her voice rough from days of silence. "One at a time. And could someone please tell me what is happening?" A man in a general's uniform stepped forward. Elena recognized him as General Morrison, one of the coalition leaders who had approved her mission. "Sergeant Major Vasquez," he said, his voice filled with respect. "You have become the most famous human being in the history of our species. Your battle with Commander Thalvax has been watched by over 1 trillion beings across the galaxy." He gestured toward the alien delegation. "These representatives are from the Galactic Council. They have come to offer humanity a seat at their table." Elena blinked in surprise and turned to look at the aliens. There were 5 of them. Each from a different species, and they were all watching her with expressions of what she could only describe as wonder. The tallest of them, an ancient creature with skin like weathered stone, stepped forward and bowed his massive head. "Sergeant Major Vasquez," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am Elder Korvax of the Galactic Council. On behalf of the 700 species we represent, I wish to extend our deepest respect and admiration." He straightened and looked at her with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "In all my centuries of existence, I have never witnessed anything like what you accomplished in that arena. You have shown the galaxy that humans are a force to be reckoned with." Elena did not know what to say. She had expected to die on that alien ship, not to wake up as some kind of galactic celebrity. "I was just doing my job," she finally managed. "I am a soldier. Fighting is what I do." Elder Korvax smiled, and there was something warm and genuine in that expression. "That is exactly what makes you so remarkable," he said. "You did not fight for glory or power. You fought because it was necessary. You were willing to sacrifice everything for your people, with no expectation of reward." He turned to address the humans in the room. "Your species has been the subject of much study since the battle," he continued. "We have examined your history, your biology, your psychology, and what we have found has been both fascinating and, I must admit, somewhat terrifying." General Morrison stepped forward with interest. "Terrifying?" he asked. "In what way?" Elder Korvax spread his hands in a gesture that seemed to encompass all of human history. "You are a species that nearly destroyed itself multiple times," he explained. "Through war, through pollution, through disease. And yet each time you recovered. Each time you came back stronger than before." He looked at Elena. "You evolved on a planet that your own scientists classify as a death world. A place where the environment itself seems designed to kill anything that tries to live there. Predators and natural disasters and diseases that would wipe out any other species barely slowed you down." The elder shook his head in amazement. "And your persistence is almost unbelievable. You traveled to your own moon using nothing but controlled explosions and mathematics, simply because you wanted to know if you could. You have spent centuries exploring your planet, pushing into the most hostile environments imaginable, dying by the thousands, and yet never stopping." Elena smiled despite her injuries. She had never thought about humanity that way before. "We do tend to be stubborn," she admitted. "Stubborn is an understatement," Elder Korvax replied. "Your species does not know how to give up. You do not accept defeat. You simply keep trying until you either succeed or die. And sometimes you succeed in situations where success should have been impossible." He bowed his head again. "That is why the Galactic Council is offering you full membership. We believe that humanity will be a valuable ally in the cycles to come. And frankly, we would rather have you as friends than as enemies." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of this moment. Humanity, which had believed itself alone in the universe until just a few weeks ago, was now being invited to join a community of hundreds of advanced species. General Morrison cleared his throat. "We will need to discuss this with our governments," he said carefully. but I believe I speak for all of humanity when I say that we are honored by this offer." Elder Korvax nodded. "Take whatever time you need. We will be waiting." He turned to leave, but paused at the door and looked back at Elena one last time. "There is one more thing," he said. "In the days since your battle, a new saying has begun to spread among the species of the galaxy. It is a warning, passed from ship to ship and world to world." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What saying?" The elder's expression was serious. "Never corner a human." He quoted, "They do not know when to stop. They do not know when they have lost. And if you hurt them, they will find a way to hurt you back, even if it takes them 1,000 years." He smiled one last time. "I suggest that anyone who encounters your species in the future would do well to remember those words." And with that, the delegation departed, leaving Elena alone with her fellow humans. General Morrison sat down in a chair beside her bed and let out a long breath. "You know," he said, "when we first received your file, there were a lot of people who thought we were crazy to send you. They wanted super soldiers and genetic modifications and advanced technology." He looked at her with profound respect. "But you proved them all wrong. You showed the entire galaxy what a single, ordinary human being can accomplish through courage and determination and sheer refusal to give up." Elena smiled and closed her eyes. She was tired, so very tired, and she wanted nothing more than to sleep for about a week. "I am not anything special," she murmured. "I am just a soldier who got lucky." General Morrison shook his head. "No, Sergeant Major," he said quietly. "You are exactly what humanity needed you to be. You are proof that we can face any challenge and survive. You are proof that we belong among the stars." Elena did not respond. She had already fallen asleep, her battered body finally getting the rest it so desperately needed. But outside the hospital, all around the world, the celebrations continued. People danced in the streets and hugged strangers and looked up at the sky with new hope in their hearts. Earth had faced its greatest threat and emerged victorious. One soldier had been enough to save them all. And as the news of the Galactic Council's offer spread across the planet, humanity began to look toward the future with excitement rather than fear. The stars were waiting for them, and this time they would be ready. The arena fell silent as Commander Thalvex descended from his throne and stepped onto the combat floor. Every eye in the stadium was fixed on the two figures standing in the center. One a towering mountain of scales and muscle, the other a small human woman who barely reached his chest. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the live broadcast on their screens. The Galactic Council had made sure that every species with access to communications technology could witness this moment. The commentators spoke in hushed, pitying tones. "This will not be a battle," one of them said. "This will be an execution. The human has no chance against Commander Thalvex. We are about to witness the end of yet another species." Elena stood perfectly still as the commander circled around her, his massive feet shaking the floor with every step. She did not try to match his movement or keep him in front of her. She simply waited. Thalvex was confused by her stillness. Every other opponent he had faced had tried to run or attack or beg for their life by this point. But this tiny human just stood there, watching him with calm, steady eyes. "You are not afraid?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I am always afraid," Elena replied. "But fear is just a feeling. It cannot control me unless I let it." The commander snarled and lunged forward with blinding speed, his claws slashing through the air toward her throat. He had killed hundreds of enemies with this exact attack, and it had never failed him. But Elena was no longer there. She had moved the moment she saw his muscles tense, throwing herself sideways and rolling across the floor. His claws passed through empty air, missing her by less than an inch. The crowd gasped in shock. No one had ever dodged the commander's first strike before. Thalvex turned and attacked again. Faster this time, a flurry of slashes and strikes that should have torn her body into pieces. But Elena kept moving, kept dodging, kept staying one step ahead of his killing blows. She was not faster than him. She could not be, because no human could match the speed of a Velkarith warrior. But she was watching his body, reading his movements, predicting where each attack would land before it was launched. This was what humans had evolved to do. For millions of years, Elena's ancestors had hunted animals that were faster and stronger than they were. They had survived by learning to read the movements of their prey, to predict their patterns, to understand their weaknesses. And now Elena was using those ancient skills against the most dangerous predator she had ever faced. The fight continued for 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. Commander Thalvex attacked again and again, his fury growing with each failed strike. Sweat began to pour down his scales, and his breathing became heavy and ragged. He had never fought this long before. His previous battles had lasted seconds, not minutes. This was completely outside his experience. And still the human kept moving. Elena was covered in cuts and bruises where his claws had grazed her skin. Blood ran down her face from a gash on her forehead, and one of her ribs was definitely cracked. But she refused to fall, refused to stop, refused to give up. This was the other thing that humans had evolved to do: endure. Her ancestors had chased their prey for hours across the African savanna, running and walking and running again until the animal they were hunting collapsed from exhaustion. They had survived ice ages and famines and plagues that should have wiped them out. Humans were not the strongest species on their planet. They were not the fastest or the most dangerous, but they were the most stubborn, the most persistent, the most absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. The Velkarith watching from the stands began to grow uneasy. This was not how battles were supposed to go. Their commander was the greatest warrior their species had ever produced, and he was being worn down by a creature half his size. 50 minutes into the fight, Commander Thalvex finally landed a solid blow. His fist slammed into Elena's chest and sent her flying across the arena, her body bouncing off the metal floor like a broken doll. The crowd roared in triumph. Surely this was the end. But Elena pushed herself back to her feet, coughing blood, her left arm hanging uselessly at her side. She swayed for a moment, then steadied herself and raised her one good fist. "Is that all you have?" she gasped, her voice rough with pain but still filled with defiance. Thalvex stared at her in disbelief. He had shattered bones with that punch. Any other being would be dead or unconscious. But this human was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to die. "What are you?" he demanded. Elena spat a mouthful of blood onto the arena floor and grinned with broken teeth. "I am a human being," she said, "and let me tell you something about my species." She took a step forward, then another, walking toward him despite her injuries. "We evolved on a planet that was trying to kill us every single day. We had to fight for every breath, every meal, every moment of survival. The weak died and the strong kept going, generation after generation, for millions of years." She was close to him now, close enough to touch, but he did not attack. He was too confused, too exhausted, too uncertain to move. "We learned to hunt animals that were bigger and stronger than us by simply following them until they dropped. We learned to eat foods that would poison any other species because we had no other choice. We learned to survive broken bones and torn muscles and infections that should have killed us 100 times over." Elena looked up at the commander's face, and her eyes were burning with something he had never seen before: absolute, unbreakable will. "Do you want to know our secret?" she asked. "Do you want to know why humans are dangerous?" She pressed one bloody finger against his chest. "We do not know when to quit," she said. we do not accept that we have lost. We keep fighting and struggling and pushing until we either win or die. And sometimes, just sometimes, we win against impossible odds. Commander Thalvex felt something cold spreading through his chest, something he had not experienced in 300 years of warfare. He felt fear. This tiny creature should have been dead a dozen times over. She was bleeding from 100 wounds. Her body was broken and battered, and yet she was still coming forward, still threatening him, still absolutely certain that she could win. And for the first time in his long and bloody life, Commander Thalvex wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had finally met an enemy he could not defeat. The thought made him angry, angrier than he had ever been before. He was the conqueror of 17 systems, the greatest warrior of the Velkarith Dominion. He would not be intimidated by this broken, bleeding, stubborn little creature. He raised his claws for another attack, pouring all of his remaining strength into one final devastating blow. But Elena had been waiting for this moment. She had been watching his patterns, learning his movements, understanding his weaknesses. And she knew, with absolute certainty, exactly where his next attack would land. She moved one last time, slipping past his claws by a margin so small that not even the cameras could capture it. And as she moved, her one good hand reached out and grabbed one of the bone decorations on his armor, snapping it free. It was the sharpened rib bone of some long-dead enemy, and it fit perfectly in her fist. The commander's momentum carried him forward, off balance, vulnerable. And Elena Vasquez, bleeding and broken but absolutely unbowed, drove the bone shard upward into the soft flesh beneath his jaw. The arena fell completely silent. Commander Thalvex, conqueror of 17 star systems, terror of the Outer Rim, greatest warrior of the Velkarith Dominion, stood frozen in the center of the arena with a bone shard buried in his brain. For one long, terrible moment, he remained upright, his burning eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Then his massive body crumpled to the floor, and the sound of his fall echoed through the silent stadium like the ending of an age. Elena Vasquez stood over him, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her body covered in blood both alien and human. She swayed on her feet but did not fall, forcing herself to remain standing through sheer force of will. The silence stretched on and on, broken only by the harsh sound of her breathing. No one in the arena moved. No one spoke. 10,000 Velkarath warriors stared at the impossible scene before them, unable to process what their eyes were telling them. Their commander was dead, killed by a creature they had considered little more than an insect. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watching the live broadcast experienced the same shock. The commentators had fallen silent, their prepared scripts about human extinction suddenly worthless. Elena turned slowly, her broken body screaming in protest, and faced the assembled Velkarith warriors. She could see the rage building in their eyes, the desperate need for revenge rising in their hearts. They wanted to tear her apart. They wanted to avenge their fallen leader. But before anyone could move, Elena spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the arena's speakers. "The right of opposition has been satisfied," she declared. Under Section 9, Article 7 of the Galactic Conquest Statutes, your fleet is now required to withdraw from Earth's system for a period of 100 galactic cycles. This is not a request, it is the law. Sub-Commander Rixel, who had been standing on a platform near the fallen commander's throne, let out a roar of fury and leaped down into the arena. He was nearly as large as Thalvex had been, and his claws were extended for killing. "You think we care about your laws?" he screamed. "You think we will let you walk away after what you have done? I will rip out your spine and wear it as a trophy." Elena did not flinch. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip, holding it up for everyone to see. "Before you do that," she said calmly, "you might want to take a look at what is on this chip." Rixel stopped his advance, confusion momentarily replacing his rage. "What trick is this?" he demanded. Elena smiled, and there was something dark and dangerous in that smile, something that made even the battle-hardened warriors around her take a step back. "This is not a trick," she said. "This is intelligence. Detailed, precise, incredibly accurate intelligence about your entire fleet." She held the chip higher. "This contains the shield frequencies of every ship in your armada, the locations of every critical system, the command codes for your communication networks, and the personal access passwords of your 17 highest-ranking officers." The color drained from Rixel's scales. That information was supposed to be impossible to obtain. "You are lying," he snarled, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Elena shook her head. "We've been watching you since your fleet entered our solar system," she explained. "We have been listening to your communications, mapping your vessels, studying your weaknesses. Did you really think we would sit idle while you threatened our world?" She laughed, and it was a cold, hard sound. "You came here thinking we were primitive savages with no understanding of galactic technology. You did not even bother to scan for hidden installations because you could not imagine that we might be capable of deception on a large scale." Elena looked around at the thousands of warriors surrounding her. "Let me tell you something about humans," she continued. "We invented deception. We've been lying to each other and to ourselves since before we had words. We created religions and philosophies and political systems, all built on stories we made up. We lie for fun, for profit, for survival. It is one of our greatest talents." She turned back to Rixel. "And while you were busy laughing at our single transport ship, we were uploading hidden programs into your fleet's computer systems and positioning our orbital defense platforms for maximum effectiveness." Rixel's eyes widened in horror. "Orbital defense platforms?" he whispered. Elena nodded. "We built them in secret over the past 3 years, buried them in asteroids and debris fields throughout the solar system. Your sensors never detected them because we designed them specifically to be invisible to Velkorath scanning technology." She pointed upward, toward the ceiling of the arena and the stars beyond. "Right now, as we speak, 147 weapons platforms are targeting your fleet. Each one is armed with nuclear missiles modified to penetrate your shields using the frequency data on this chip." Elena took a step closer to Rixel, her broken body somehow finding the strength to project absolute confidence. "If your fleet is not in hyperspace within 1 hour, every single one of those platforms will fire simultaneously. And thanks to the intelligence we have gathered, not a single shot will miss." She held the data chip out toward him. "You can take this chip and verify everything I'm telling you. Or you can try to attack me and watch your entire fleet burn. The choice is yours." For a long moment, Rixel stared at her, his mind racing through the possibilities. He wanted to call her bluff, wanted to believe she was lying, but something in her eyes told him that she was speaking the absolute truth. And there was something else, something even more terrifying than the threat of hidden weapons. This human had just killed the greatest warrior his species had ever produced. Had just defeated Commander Thalvex in single combat despite being smaller, weaker, and hopelessly outmatched. If she was capable of that, what else might her species be capable of? What other surprises might be waiting for the Velkorath if they chose to continue this fight? Rixel made his decision. "All ships," he spoke into his communication device, his voice heavy with defeat. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal. Set course for the nearest hyperspace junction. We are leaving this system." A murmur of shock and protest rose from the warriors in the arena, but Rixel silenced them with a gesture. "The right of opposition has been satisfied," he said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "We have lost this battle, and the law requires us to withdraw. There will be no further discussion." He turned back to Elena, and his eyes burned with hatred. "This is not over, human," he snarled. "We will return in 100 cycles, and when we do, we will show no mercy." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "You are welcome to try," she said, "but I would suggest you think very carefully before you do. Because now you know what humans are capable of when we are cornered." She smiled one last time. "And imagine what we will be capable of after 100 years of preparation." Rixo had no response to that. He simply turned and walked away, his warriors following behind him in stunned silence. Within 40 minutes, every Velkareth ship had jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth's solar system empty of alien threats. Elena Vasquez stood alone in the abandoned arena, surrounded by the blood of her fallen enemy, and finally allowed herself to collapse to her knees. She had done it. She had saved her world. And as the pain finally overwhelmed her and darkness crept into the edges of her vision, she heard the distant sound of human voices coming through the speakers. Millions of her fellow humans cheering and crying and celebrating. It was, she decided, a good sound to hear before she passed out.